Okay, I'm Bob Woerner, running for Livermore City Council.
Okay. What's your favorite thing about Livermore?
Oh, I think the community character, the small town feel. I mean, I came here 42 years ago, and I know we've grown, but I think we've grown responsibly. But it's great to be able to go around town and see people you know, and it's very comfortable, and that's what I think we need to preserve.
Why are you running for city council again?
That's a good question. I mean, I've been on the council a number of years. It's a lot of hard work. And I got on the council to start with because I wanted to give back to the community. Been here a long time and getting near the career retirement, I thought I had time to give back. Frankly, I didn't realize how hard it is, but I've been there now and I understand just how much work it takes, and I'm willing to do it, and I think I've shown that I can do a good job.
So our first major issue is one that's been a big issue for quite a while. It's the downtown plan. And let's start with Stockman's Park. The park will obviously go downtown. And do you support the council's decision for Stockman's Park?
Well, I think I have to say yes, because it was my idea based on a conversation with the Stockman, and it was just serendipity that it happened, because I was working with Interfaith Housing to see about freeing up some land that the city owns next to the current council chambers on Pacific Avenue. And we had a meeting with the Stockman, and they had, when they gave the land to the city, put a restriction on it that said it could not be used for housing. So we went to have the meeting about, well, how can we use it for housing? And what they pointed out in the meeting was that the land that the Interfaith Housing was targeting was reserved for a park to honor them. And then one of the elders of the Stockman, Don Stasa, paused and said, but the park doesn't have to be there. And at that moment, I put two and two together and said, we're building a park downtown. How about if we name the park downtown after the Stockman in your honor? Will you let us build the housing on Pacific? And they said they would. They thought that was a good idea. They'd have to check with their board. They did very quickly, and they said, yeah, we're good to go. So then we entered into negotiations, and it's turned out to be a win-win for everybody. We get up to 140 units of affordable housing for seniors and veterans that we otherwise would not have been able to do. We get to offset $10 million of the purchase price of the downtown site, and we get our large central park. And we get to honor our Western heritage and the veterans. I mean, and one other thing, I worked to ensure that we would have a cultural core easement. So we've got everything in that deal. It's beautiful.
Let's move on to the plan to put a hotel downtown. A downtown hotel has been in the works for 20 years now, and it looks like it might finally come to fruition. Do you support the council's decision to place the hotel next to the Bankhead Theater?
I do, and I voted that way. And I think it's anybody who gets into the details understands it's a complex decision. But what we learned in the outreach and the key learnings before that in the steering committee, it's important to put the hotel on Livermore Avenue. So now, there are two sides of Livermore Avenue. The other side, the west side of Livermore Avenue, has Stockman's Park. And in the outreach, the number two priority was protecting our character, which means protecting, I guess it's the Blacksmith Square, rather. It's protecting that, sorry, not Stockman's Park. So then you're only left with one side. Now there's one other important thing to consider, is we could have, in principle, put the hotel way west onto L Street. But if we did that, it would have been sitting out in the middle of nothing for many years, and we want that hotel to be successful. So that was a very compelling argument that another fellow council member raised, and that helped convince me that the hotel should go on the east side next to the theater.
So Livermore is no longer immune to the housing crisis of the Bay Area. And the current council and yourself recognized this and decided to put 130 units of workforce housing in the downtown plan. Do you support workforce housing being developed in the downtown plan?
Well, this is another one where I have to say yes, because again, it was my idea. So that if you think about the history of the housing downtown, when those plans, say a couple of decades ago, were first envisioned with a large regional theater, BART downtown, the people at the time were talking about 426 units of housing. And then when we went into the outreach or the RFP stage of the cities put that out, it was reduced to 260 units of housing. And then when we were having a lot of community interaction and people they wanted to reduce the amount of housing to a minimum, Stephen Spadowski put a suggestion out that I supported, or a motion, not just a suggestion, that to reduce the housing element to 130 units. And when the election last time was around, we seated a new council, and we were going through all the different priorities and elements. I suggested that the housing element that we put downtown be pure workforce housing. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Most importantly is that we really do need to have the critical workers be able to live near town. So that's the main driver. It's the right thing to do. This is the police, fire, teachers, nurses. Second of all, for every unit of affordable workforce, and workforce housing is a subset of affordable housing, for every unit, we get to credit ourselves, the city gets to credit itself for the land and that, about $70,000. So that's another, about $9 million. So between the Stockman's Park deal and making it pure workforce housing, we've got like 19 million to offset the costs of that and 14.5 million. So it's financially the right thing to do. So it's the proper thing to do for our city. It's financially the right thing to do. And thirdly, if you look at the way that land was bought with using affordable housing funds and all the different parcels, there is a legal obligation to put housing down there. So that 130 units satisfies all three of those obligations, and it's a good compromise.
Okay. Parking was identified as the biggest priority for citizens in the outreach process. Do you believe this plan has too many, too few, or just the right amount of parking?
I think it has. And neither of those answers are correct, because just the right amount is hard to determine. But I will say it has more parking, and it has more of the right kind of parking. So for instance, in the immediate vicinity of the Bankhead Theater, currently we have 3 ADA spaces. This plan's got 15, so it's 5 times as much right next to the theater. Plus we have a convenient drop-off zone. Now, the next kind of parking you would think about is the immediate vicinity of the Bankhead Theater. Now, we'll put the hotel right next to the Bankhead Theater, so that surface lot, which has about 63 spaces at the moment, will go away. But we will have a couple of dozen spaces on the surface, and then there's going to be a garage underneath the hotel, which will have another 20-some spaces. And then, if you think about right now, in the area between Blacksmith Square and Uncle Hughes, there's maybe 40 spaces immediately across the street. So that will go into the Stockman's Park, but equivalent north across Railroad Avenue, next to the existing parking garage, we'll be adding additional parking. So we're going to have more ADA parking next to the Bankhead. We will actually have more parking within a block of the Bankhead. And thirdly, we're putting a parking garage down on First and L, which will help energize the west end of town, and we need more parking there. And we're preserving the surface lot right behind First Street and so people will have convenient in and out for their quick errands. They'll have a parking garage at the west end. They'll have new parking north. So we're going to have more parking. It'll be different, and it'll be fine. And it'll be quite a bit more.
So our next big issue is campaign finance. During the last citywide election, when individuals were limited to campaign donations of only $250 per candidate, political action committees spent upwards of $230,000, with most of that money spent by a single group on negative ads. How do you plan to win this election?
Well, I think when you look at that kind of money, I personally can't compete with that. And I think that, and trying to do that and fight that game on those terms isn't going to work. So actually, I've been on the, as I said, on the council a while now. I've done really good work. I've got a good track record. And there are a number of people that have endorsed me. So my strategy really is quite simple, is I'm going to ask those people to tell their networks that I'm a good guy to vote for. And I've done well, and I will continue to do well. And that doesn't really cost anybody a lot of money. It does require a little effort on people, but I believe this election is important, and that it should not be determined by a few very wealthy individuals.
So you said that you don't think you need to raise a lot. How much do you think you need to raise, and how do you plan on raising that money?
Well, I'll ask people, although frankly, I find that awkward to ask for that help. And so I'm out there, and if people want to contribute, it's greatly appreciated. But traditionally, before this big money really got into the politics, being on a council campaign only cost $5,000 to $10,000. And so that's not that much, really. And I think that there are enough individuals that will help me, but that's all very practical amount. Trying to go beyond that doesn't seem reasonable on my part.
What are your thoughts on political action committees operating in Livermore?
Well, political action committees are legal. I wish that they would be transparent as to who funds them, where the money is coming from, and timely transparency. And I would hope, frankly, that the political action committees help get the truth out as to what's really going on, and stay away from sort of emotional agendas that will tug at people's not rational minds, really. So that's my hope.
Will you condemn efforts by PACs to run negative advertising against your opponents?
Yes, I think that it doesn't feel good to me. I've signed the fair campaign practices. I want to be what's there. Now we have to understand that. I think it was Truman that pointed it out, that some people think telling the truth is negative campaigning. So I would want to draw that distinction, is that as long as it's truthful and accurate, I think that's what we should be about.
So last few questions. What are some ideas that you have for the city that we haven't already talked about?
Well, these are some ideas I've actually started a while ago. Now, if you step back and you say, what does the city need? The number one job of the city council is public safety. And in order to provide for public safety, you have to be financially strong. So there are a few things that I've done in the past, and there's one ongoing now. But several years ago, I was at the forefront of making sure that we, as rapidly as possible, built back up our reserves after the Great Recession, and we're in pretty good shape now, but not great, but we're a lot better than most cities. The other thing is, several years ago, because of some action of a previous council, a decade and a half ago, our unfunded pension liability had grown to $100 million. And I was at the one who said, we got to solve that problem. And as a result, we've now, that 109 million has been reduced to 55 million, is probably going lower. And the remainder is now being addressed in the city budget. The other, before it was not. So those are two major things. That's saving the city $50 million right there. And I also mentioned the deal on the Stockman's Park and the workforce housing. The third thing, it's kind of boring, but extremely important, is what's called asset management. We have a lot of infrastructure that is aging, and we have to make sure that we can keep it up. Most cities just kind of ignore it. And I've been the one who initiated, we're going to have to look at it head on and make some choices. So now once you've gotten financially strong and you're providing for public safety, then you can get to enhancing the quality of life. And because we are financially strong, we can do things to make sure that we have a really great city.
Now, our last question, I'm going to have you address the camera at the citizens of Livermore directly. And is there anything that you would like to say to the people of Livermore before we go?
Well, I would just like to say that it's been a privilege to be on the council for several years. I've done really good work. It's taken a lot of effort, and I would appreciate your support in keeping me there to continue to do good things for the city. So thank you.